Team USA's U19 team just dominated the FIBA World Cup. Best of all, we get to watch almost all of these guys in college this season.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Andy Patton, joined by my co-host, the great Isaac Schade here. You are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day, Monday through Friday, throughout the off season, into the season as well. We'll have a sixth show for you on Saturdays as well. Want to thank all of you for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Remind you that you can check out the show ad-free on Amazon Music. And of course, we got to give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you who are hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. All right, Isaac, we got a lot of FIBA talk today. Team USA dominates the U19 World Cup. Who you should know about this upcoming season. We're going to talk about some of the best incoming freshmen in college basketball, how they looked in this tournament. We're also going to talk about some of the non-Team USA players, some guys from around the country, some players from Germany, from Canada, player from Israel who looked fantastic. We're going to talk about that and what it means for college hoops, because all those guys are committed to college basketball programs as well. So lots of names to get to cover for this upcoming season. And then, since we're talking about international guys coming over to the States, we're going to kind of talk about that and the future of this in college sports in general, as we've seen this become a trend recently. But with NIL, with the House settlement, it feels like there might be some changes coming to that. So we're going to get to that to close out the show. But Isaac, a team led by Mikel Brown, led by Koa Pete, of course, AJ Dybantsa, who looked outstanding, Nick Comenia, Morez Johnson, so many other great names, mostly incoming freshmen, although, again, obviously, Morez Johnson, that's not the case. There's also some 2026 prospects who are uncommitted as of this recording, who had some really nice performances for Team USA, but want to focus on the college programs who were most impacted by what we saw in this tournament and kind of talk about which fan bases out there should be just grinning from ear to ear after seeing how their player or players in this World Cup performed. Are there any that kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Andy, obviously, look, let's set AJ Dybantsa aside because we've heard about him for so long. I think hopefully a lot of people have. If not, hello. Introduce yourselves to AJ Dybantsa. He's going to play at BYU. Yes, BYU. And so obviously they're very excited. I want to set that aside and look at other schools. And I think, Andy, we have to start with Mikel Brown at Louisville, because for those who follow recruiting, they already know his name. I mean, he's a top, I think he's sixth at 247 in the final rankings. And so it's not like he's just somebody that snuck in. It's like, holy cow, this dude came out of nowhere. No. But if you were unfamiliar with anyone past Dybantsa, the Boozers, and Darren Peterson, for example, you didn't know Mikel Brown, and now you do, baby. And if anyone who loves college basketball like we do is paying attention to this, wake up and smell some Mikel Brown coffee, or maybe go eat some Kentucky Fried Chicken, because this dude going to be lighting up AFC Yum Center, Andy. And so I think for me, it's the answer has to be Pat Kelsey in Louisville. Good night.
Yeah, I agreed for a lot of reasons. I think, he looked fantastic in this tournament. I think one thing we should mention here, every player on Team USA looked good. Like legitimately, we were looking at the players who had like the lowest efficiency and the lowest like plus minus, and their stats were still good. Like this team just dominated through and through.
Jasper Johnson, for example,
you were right. Yeah. In this event, they were just outstanding. And so like that take some of the stats with a little bit of a grain of salt. But for Louisville, like Mikel Brown, he shot the lights out, 20 of 42 from three in this event, just nearly 50%. He had over 6 assists per game. Nobody played more than like 22, 23 minutes per game. So 6 assists in 23 minutes is excellent. But Louisville also, Pat Kelsey in particular, has a reputation of really doing some great things with point guards. And Chucky Hepburn, obviously, last year was an incredible example of that. It's not like he was bad at Wisconsin, but he had a new gear when he joined that Cardinals team. And for a roster that's got Ryan Conwell, that's got McNeely coming in, that's got this incredible group of shooters, having a point guard who can facilitate the offense the way Mikel Brown can, this team is set up really nicely. And I think Mikel Brown's going to really turn some heads if he hasn't already.
Andy, I think the next place I would go is funny enough because Tommy Lloyd was the head coach of this team.
Yeah.
Is Arizona and Koa Pete. Koa
Mhm.
Pete has been one of the. I feel like he was one of the first people I heard of in this class, actually outside of the boozers. Like I feel
Mhm.
like I remember hearing about him before I even knew who AJ Dybantsa was, or before I knew who Darren Peterson was.
Yeah.
And like I feel like he's fought like at 247. I think he's maybe dropped out of the top 10 when it all was said. Yeah, 11th. Okay,
Mhm.
when all was said and done. But good grief, Andy. What? First off, this is a crazy accolade. Winning America winning the gold here. He became the most decorated USA men's junior national team player in history. It's his fourth gold medal already with USA basketball each of the this summer and each of the last three. Crazy stuff. But Andy, I'm so impressed with his motor as a four, his size. I think, man, he's going to be great in the desert as they, just continue to try to replace talent. Caleb Love is out the door. Carter Bryant just got drafted. And so I think Cats fans are going to love Koa Pete.
Yeah, not an outside shooter, but man, he's a super efficient scorer. He averaged 7 rebounds per game in this event, 12.5 points. Like he looked outstanding. And I think, obviously Tommy Lloyd certainly is wanting to see what he's got for his own sake too, as well, coming into Arizona. And I'm sure that this helped kind of even solidify like what kind of role and what kind of player he's going to be when he gets to the Wildcats. But man, he sure made an impact on this team and really in USA basketball already, to have that level of success on the world stage before you even played a game in college basketball is just unreal to be at that level.
Yeah.
I think those are the biggest ones. I think Louisville and Arizona, like I said, we'll talk about Dybantsa here in a second. I would kind of toss out like Morez Johnson looked great. Obviously, we kind of already know a little bit about who he is because he's already played college basketball in Michigan. He's transferring to Michigan this year. Kind of already got a sense. But man, he was excellent in this event as well. Right. And Duke gets Nick Kamenia. He looks like the 3-point shooting, floor spacing four that they know they want him to be and expect him to be. And Daniel Jacobson looked like the absolute behemoth down low that Purdue wants him to be. So, like, I think some of the other teams, JJ Mandikit for Washington looked very good as a backup point guard, averaged over 5 assists per game. So there's a lot to like here. And I think just for college basketball in general, so many great players joining the sport this year. And we're not even talking, Darren Peterson's number one in a lot of places, or at least number two in this class. The Boozers are obviously both in the top 15, top 20. Obviously, Cameron Boozer, top 3. Nate Ament is a top 5 prospect. Like, you don't have Acuff, you don't have Chris Senack, Caleb Wilson, like so many supercharged, super talented freshmen who weren't even in this event. So it's going to be a really fun year of diaper dandies in college hoops next year.
And Andy, I think the Big Ten has to be excited about both of those big men returners you talked about, like Purdue, for them having Jacobson have this opportunity, whether he's backing up TKR at the 5 or whether they start together in the front court, we'll see that. And I think maybe because of Morez Johnson's injury last year at Illinois, a lot of people might not totally be aware of him. And so to see him starting in this event and doing so well is really, really big time. You mentioned the 2026 guys that aren't going to be in college this year. Guys, just names to keep your eyes on. The top 2 players in the class by most people's ratings are Tyron Stokes and Brandon McCoy. They were both in this event. Jordan Smith started, Andy, as a 26 player. He was one of the 5 starters. And then Caleb Holt, another guy who's really, really good in the class of 26 as well, all to keep your eyes on.
Yeah, so let's get into the Dybantsa of it all here before we move on and start talking about the non-Team USA guys. The main talking point for Dybantsa, he won the MVP, and I think the talking point number one, should he have won the MVP of the event? I think Mikel Brown was better. Statistically, he was better, and I think just from an eye test watching them play, Brown kind of made more of an impact in my kind of vision of the games than Dybantsa did. But the other big thing with Dybantsa was like, he didn't shoot it well from 3 at all. And it's a very small sample size. We're talking about 18 3-point attempts, but he made 2. 11%. And this team shot 40. This team shot 40% from 3. Almost every single player on this roster who attempted any threes at all shot it well. Brown was 47%. Jordan Smith was 35%. Holt was 52%. Jasper Johnson was 41%. Kamenia was 44%. Like, everybody shot it well except Dybantsa. And again, the sample size. But for Dybantsa, that's a big question about his impact at the next level, just like it was a question for Cooper Flagg before he got to college. And Flagg kind of quieted a lot of the doubters by shooting the ball well from three, not elite, but well. Dybantsa doesn't have to shoot 40% at BYU. He doesn't even have to shoot like 38. If he shoots 35, I think it's fine as long as he does the other stuff that we know he's capable of doing, which is what he did in this tournament, by the way. He was incredibly efficient on 2-point shots. He looks good defensively. He's a good rebounder. He's a good passer for his size. Like, the 3-point shot doesn't have to be elite, but it can't be 11% either. So I think that that's kind of the question for Dybantsa. Part of the reason I think Brown should have been the MVP, but I'm not worried about Dybantsa, but it's something people are going to be wondering about.
Yeah, to your point, Andy, small sample size. He was 84% at the free throw line, 42 of 50. You know, that isn't a clear indicator, but better days are probably ahead for AJ. But yeah,
by the way, 68.5% on twos, just because I looked it up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's insanity. But yeah, because of what the numbers were, and I agree with you, because of the kind of game impact, I thought Mikel Brown should have been the MVP of this event. Does it ultimately matter? No, but I like justice to be served. And I think, look, AJ's going to get so many flowers in his life. Can we just throw Mikel Brown a bone here as well?
Yep.
Oh, Andy. So anyway, Team USA just dominated this event so many ways, set tons of records, nice balance. Everybody gets minutes. I'm just really encouraged by it, for our country and for what college basketball is going to get. Now, while Team USA dominated, there were quite a few international prospects, Andy, that we had our eyes on as well, who also made their college coaches and teammates very happy during this World Cup. We're going to discuss some other players that turned heads in just a second. Right after I tell you about game time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head on down to a ball game with your friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. I get that, man. I love going to a ball game. Well, that's exactly where Game Time comes in to help you in this moment. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, it's great because you can then splurge on food and drinks or merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you and help buy their tickets. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a low price guarantee that it takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticket partner of Locked On MLB, making it the easy way to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. How about the All-Star Game, which is next week? Tickets right now as cheap as $302 at Truist, where my Braves play. Boy, they're bad. But if you want to get in and go check it, buy some now or maybe wait till it gets closer because the ticket prices go down. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Andy, we were just discussing the Team USA 12-man roster and why we should be excited about 8 of those 12 playing in college basketball this year, the other 4 hopefully next year. But the nice thing is, in this day and age, it ain't just about the Team USA guys. There's a whole host of internationals that are going to be making their way over. A lot of them, thankfully, because of NIL. Thank you for getting that figured out, everyone. And in fact, we're going to talk more about that to wrap the show today in the third segment. But Andy, who are some of these freshmen that really turned your head or eyeballs or made your heart flutter or whatever you want to say that you're excited to see in college basketball this year? And maybe like why you're excited about that person and how they're going to affect their team's roster.
Yeah, I think you got to start with Omer Mayer from heading to Purdue for the Israeli team. He was outstanding. I mean, for Purdue, like Matt Painter continues to find players who were, under recruited or not recruited at all. I mean, the story about Zach Edey, everybody's heard it a million times. He was outside the top 400 in his recruiting class. Braden Smith had like no other recruiting offers. Like they rarely land transfers. They usually add kind of not super well regarded, highly ranked prospects, recruits. And they're doing it again. I mean, this is a kid who wasn't on a whole bunch of people's radar, and then he goes out and throughout this event, he averages 20 points, 5 boards, over 4 assists. He shot 38% from 3. He had a 33-point performance where he shot 5 of 12 from 3 against Cameroon in this thing. Like he looked outstanding. And I mean, I think just watching the tape, watching the film on him, I mean, you can see the kind of impact he's going to have for Matt Painter's team and how the impact he's going to potentially have as soon as right away. I mean, he's certainly not going to have the same role. And I think that's what's, challenging about this for a lot of these players, obviously, is, players who are playing for countries that don't have as many, players that are college capable. They're going to be, he's taking on a lead role he's not going to have at Purdue when they have Smith and Lawyer and all those guys. But at the very minimum, if you stick him in a corner and let him just bomb threes, he's going to be really good at that. So like, I think that he's somebody who really impressed me and should we be surprised? I mean, it's not like a team that just lucked into a guy by chance. Like this is what Matt Painter continually does and is wildly successful at. And seeing Mayer perform this way kind of just continues to prove that being the case for that program.
I like that you used the phrase "as soon as right away." I don't know why, but I just thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, right. As soon as right away.
But I mean, we talked about Daniel Jacobson in the last segment from Team USA and Mayer here. And look, both of these guys are I said maybe Jacobson's backing up TKR. Maybe he's starting with him in the front court. Maybe he's backing up Oscar Clough at the 5 for all we know. Right. Because neither of these guys, they're probably bench guys because you got Smith and Lawyer and CJ Cox probably in the backcourt on the wings, TKR and Clough. And so then you've got Jacobson doing that, and Mayer able to come in and adjust to things. Good night. I might need to move Purdue up, and I've already got him in my top 3, Andy. Yeah. And so that's great stuff. Let's talk about another team that's been really good. Not as good last year, but it's hard to stay up at back-to-back national championships. And that's UConn, who had 2 guys competing in this event from 2 different countries, Germany's Eric Reibe and Australia's Jacob Furphy. Yes, no relationship to, he might know him. No relation, I should say, to Johnny Furphy, just so happened to have the same last name. For Germany's Eric Reibe, you might have seen, if you watched the championship game, the gold medal game, you saw him play against Team USA. But for the event, Reibe had 15.4 points, 5 boards a game, 1.6 assists, 58.7 from the field. He's a big man inside. Jacob Furphy, 16.7 points, 4.4 boards, 2.4 assists, 31.4 from 3. And so, look, I'm sure they connected and probably had some good times there at this event. That Coach Hurley was tuned into it to see what was going on. But you bring those guys in with some of that other experience, some of the transfers they got in, Andy, like Demery, but you bring that in alongside a solo ball and a caravan, and it's like, man, Andy, UConn could be right back to where they were 2 years ago.
It's a lot of similarities with Purdue in the sense of having these international guys who are going to come in and not be expected to shoulder the load right away. So if there is an opportunity, or if they are ready to do it, if they are good enough, it's like where they're just knocking on the door and saying, we need to play, like we're good enough to not only play but have the ball in our hands, then great, you have an embarrassment of riches. And if they're not ready to be that guy, then you have the veteran guys in front of them. We said it with Purdue, and like you said with UConn, they get Demery, they get Malachi Smith coming in from Dayton, they get Caravan back, the solo balls back. Like this team has so much talent that like they don't need these 2 guys to play big roles right away, but they looked like they can. And I think that's what makes this so dangerous, is UConn's depth might be a really huge strength for them next year. When last year it at times was kind of a challenge for them. So I'm excited to see what those guys can bring. A couple others that I really want to mention here. I've got to mention Hans Steinbach from Germany, who's going to Washington. We talked a little bit about Mandikit on the Team USA team in the first segment, also going to Washington next year. But Steinbach looked fantastic in this thing. He's a big man, reportedly. From our good buddy Roman Tomashov, from Locked On Huskies. Reportedly, Steinbach was kind of the reason that Nico Mundolo ended up not going to Washington. So, a little bit of pressure on the big man, but 17.5 points, 13 rebounds per game, 65% from the field. He is an absolute menace. He is, I will say this, I think he's going to be one of the best offensive rebounders in the country, not just freshman offensive rebounders. He is that good on the offensive glass. He's going to be a complete menace in the Big Ten. I'm really excited to see what he can bring. And I think UW should be quite happy with how Mandikit performed for Team USA, and in particular how Steinbach looked for this Germans club.
By the way, I keep having to remind myself. Do you remember where Nico wound up after he left UW?
It took me a second. It's Ole Miss, but it took me a second to remember that.
Like it's going to take me a while to like have that locked in because I had him at Washington for so long. That is, oh man. Speaking of this Germany team, man, Christian Anderson getting this experience, coming back to Texas Tech. That's big for him as well. Just a couple other names that stood out. I'm just going to literally name them, Andy. Tyler Kropp from Argentina, who will be at Northwestern. He had 21.7 points a game in this.
He led the entire event in points per game, by the way.
And 9.7 boards, just shy of averaging a double-double at a FIBA U19 World Cup. I mean, it's insane. Serbia's Andre Kostic, who's at K-State with PJ Haggerty. Australia's Luke Fennell, who will be up at Syracuse. Hopefully they can get things back rolling. Good grief. And then Canada's Spencer Aarons, who is at Boise State. Andy, good stuff.
Yeah, a lot of really talented players. A couple that I'd mentioned very briefly that are not freshmen, but like Julius Halafanoa played in this thing, and I'm excited to see what he can do at Georgetown entering his second season.
He should take a massive leap.
I think he's going to take a big leap, and he looked good in this event, which makes me feel even better about the possibility of that happening. But Isaac, we kind of touched on it a little bit before, kind of in the opening there, but we're going to continue to talk about these internationals coming stateside because it's been a really big thing the last couple of years as NIL has kind of been in its free fall era. But with the straps tightening a little bit, with the House settlement and everything, it could really alter how many of these internationals are coming over to the states to play college hoops. So we're going to talk about what we mean by that and what we think the future might look like for that coming up here in just a second. All right, Isaac, as we talked about, we've kind of had this topic that we wanted to touch on for a while here, and it felt like a good time as we were just having this conversation about all these incoming 2025 freshmen who are going to be playing here in college hoops, and so many other fantastic freshmen coming over. I say freshmen, they're going to be freshmen, but some of them are not freshman age. That's a topic for another time that we may get into. But I was like, oh, Luka Bogovac. I'm like, yeah, he's a freshman, but he's 22, I think. Mario Saint-Superi at Gonzaga, I think he's about to turn 20. Like, these guys are mostly older, but it's a thing that we've seen. Kasparis Yakachonis was older last year. Demon at BYU was older last year. Like, we've seen this influx of these guys coming over, and this offseason there's been a bunch of them. I mean, a bunch of them, and more happening almost every single team. Dame Sarr is a huge one over at Duke. Like, and I feel like that might be about to change in a fairly significant way. Obviously, the House settlement is changing just about everything about college basketball in so many different ways in terms of NIL and how it's structured and how certain programs are going to have an advantage or a disadvantage. And I think Clemson's already complaining about only having 11% of their programs NIL money. And like, what's that going to mean for them compared to some programs in the ACC that are probably going to have more like 18 or 20%. Like, there's just a whole bunch of things. But ultimately, the inability to spend as much money as you want is likely going to impact players internationally who were coming over to the States primarily because the amount of money they could make here was dwarfing the amount of money they could make even playing professionally in their home countries. If that starts to change, if these big programs, these SEC schools and, the richer ACC schools and Big Ten schools are unable to commit a certain amount of money to these players, they're going to stay where they are. And I guess we didn't even really put this in the notes, but Isaac, another thing that could happen is like, they're just going to all go to the Big East and Gonzaga, like programs that aren't dealing with the fact that most of their money is going to go to football. So it'll be an interesting thing, but it feels to me like we're about to see a fairly significant shift already. And it's only been a few years of kind of getting used to this shift of all these guys coming over.
You know what I would say to Coach Brownell? It sounds like he needs to go sit down in Dabo's office and have a little conversation about maybe Clemson football not being so good and taking all the money. Yeah, Andy, it's such an interesting thing because each offseason of the pay-for-play version of NIL, which, let's be honest, I mean, it's just that's what it's been, right? Yeah. Like, we haven't even been trying to hide it. Yeah. Each season of that, it's just exponentially gone up. What was a massive contract last offseason? Let's say Great Osibor or
Umar Ballo.
Well, yeah, and even that, like his looked small as the offseason went on, right? Like he got $1 million to go to Indiana, and that was dwarfed by Great Osabor's $2 million,
Yep.
or what's his butt that went to K-State, like good.
Coleman Hawkins.
Thank you, Coleman. I had the C and I couldn't get his name. And then this year, those $2 million ones are like, okay, cute, right?
Right.
And so I'm just very curious to see what's going to start happening, because we really haven't heard any NIL GO results yet, Andy. And I think that's part of it, because there's like this two-pronged thing now that we got to figure out how the maths, right? Like what is the percentage that guys are going to get paid, or basketball teams are going to get paid, and then individuals from rev share. And by the way, who's even going to go all in on rev share, right? Like you mentioned those Big East schools in Gonzaga, will they all max out at $20.5 million for the first year, or will they not? And then that's going to keep going up by 4%. So schools can obviously say, I don't know, let's say Andy Patton is coming over from, where you want to be from, Andy?
Serbia.
Andy Patton's coming over from Serbia, and out of our rev share, we can promise him $1.3 million. And then, hey, we know that we can set you up with the local Chevy, and that's your NIL. And so that package totaled, brings you to 2 million or something like that. Is that how it's going to math now? Right. But are there any assurances that NIL GO is going to approve that Chevy deal, that Chevy deal? And so that, I think that's where it's going to sit for me, is when are we, I want to see somebody get denied on an NIL GO situation, right? Like, when is that going to start happening? Because unless I've just missed it, I haven't heard yet of any denials or approvals being made public. And maybe that's as we get closer to the season. But I think that is going to be a huge part of this calculus in, will international guys see the financial incentive to keep flocking to the States for college?
Yeah. And I think, I think the way that these student athletes, international student athletes, have been paid has been a little bit murky anyway, because NIL is different for internationals, and the specifics of that are intentionally quite vague, because they're figuring out ways to get around it. And I think they'll still figure out ways to get around it, but will they get around it and also get around NIL GO? I don't know the answer to that, and I think that's the big question. And the other big question for me is, and I don't think this is going to happen anytime super soon, but there are already grumblings. There are already people overseas who are wanting transfer fees, who do not want to lose their players who they have developed for, in some cases, 6, 8, 10 years, because that's how it works in most European countries, is you kind of have them in the in your effectively your minor leagues, your youth level. They come up, they start playing for the big club for a year or two, and then suddenly they go to the United States, where they're kind of signing basically a 1-year deal for X amount of money, and it's a bit vague and confusing, and these programs are getting nothing out of it. They're developing talent and then losing it to a college program that's only keeping them for a year most of the time. So those programs overseas are not happy about that, and they're wanting to figure out a way to work with the NCAA to have some kind of transfer fee. The NCAA obviously does not want to do this, and is going to it's going to try to not do it as much as they can, but at some point the rubber's going to meet the road, and either these programs overseas are going to find ways to keep their talent, or they're going to, I don't know what's going to happen there, but it's absolutely a big part of this conversation too, is if there's some hesitance to come over to the United States because they're going to, piss off their home club, or their home club's telling them, no, you can't go unless we get X amount of money or whatever. It's another wrinkle in this conversation that I think is not really a super prominent part of the conversation yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now it's a much bigger talking point, and something that might end up kind of altering this conversation yet again, as it's already been altered so many times in the last couple of years.
And here's another part of that calculus, Andy, with like, do I come over or not? You think Yegor Demon goes 8th to the Nets if he was playing internationally? Do you think that Yakachonis goes 20th to the Heat, right? Like, because you come play 35 to 40 times on ESPN or Fox or wherever it is. It's the same to me of like why it makes so much more sense. Let's say if Zion Williamson, who coming into the 2018-19 season was 3rd in the class, 4th in the class, behind, a couple of his own teammates in the North Carolina. If he had gone G League or OTE or something like that, instead of playing at Duke, he probably is still doing the things he did, but nobody would care or notice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. And I think like players who already have big names have been able to have successfully done that, like LaMelo Ball, but everybody knew who LaMelo Ball was. So like that doesn't really count in the same way, I don't think. I'd look at like somebody like Nolan Traore, who didn't come over. He stayed in France. He was rumored. Gonzaga was looking at him. A handful of other schools were looking at him. And then as his performance dipped, his draft stock kind of fell. Now, the same thing happened with Jaak Jonas, who his performance dipped as the season went on. He also had an injury, and he was drafted 20th. And I think Traore was drafted 19th or 21st. I know he was one spot.
He was 19, one spot ahead of Jaak Jonas.
So, so the same thing kind of happened, which is an argument that maybe it wasn't that big of a difference, but like a heck of a lot more people talked about Jaak Jonas. Like a heck of a lot more people are aware of who he was. And if you're a superstar international, like Alex Sarr, who was the first pick, or Reece Shea, who's with the Atlanta Hawks, like, sure, those guys get picked really high. But I wonder about, like, I don't think there's anything Kaman Malawach could have done. Even if he'd gone, instead of coming to the United States, if he'd gone somewhere in Europe or played for, one of the top Euro clubs instead of coming over here, I doubt he goes top 10. So like, it still matters. It still has a big impact to play here in the States, to play college hoops, to play in March Madness if you can. And I don't think that's going to go away. But if you're, if you're going to be offered $1 million in your home club to play in your home country in front of your home fans, and teams overseas or teams in the States are saying, hey, we love you, we'd love to have you come over here, we might be able to get you $1 million, but we don't know for sure. Like, I think that you're going to see these numbers kind of dwindle a little bit, and dwindle still, meaning they'll be higher than they've been for most of college basketball history, just maybe not as astronomically high as they've
higher
been
than zero.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Man, going to be really interesting to keep our eyes on this. We'll have to keep tabs on it and see what's happening. There's more conversations that Andy and I want to have surrounding this, with like, does everything go back under the table? Like, what happens with all that? So we'll keep those conversations going through the offseason. Hey, thanks so much for being here with us to kick off a brand new week of Locked On College Basketball. I guess it's the first full week of July. That's crazy. That means it's just August, September, October, November. Now 4 months until the season starts, Andy, and that's good stuff. You know what? July, August, September, October. Yeah, that's fine. We're not counting July anymore. It's already done. So I mean, the fireworks are over, so it might as well be August already. Is where we're at. So can't wait to be with you throughout the rest of this week. Andy's going to have tomorrow's show on Wednesday. We're going to have one of Seton Hall's assistant coaches. Thursday show will be Leaf and I, and then Friday, Andy and I will be back together. I think we're going to have some Friday facts, yes, Mr. Patton. That'll be a lot of fun. So good week. Make sure you make plans to be with us all week long. If you haven't subscribed to the show to make sure you catch all those, do that right now. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, that link is in the show notes. We'd love to see you in there. It's free to join. As always, Andy Patton, apologies to the lawyer family. Sorry. I guess we talked about Braden and not him. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the McBruins, and until tomorrow, peace.